Good morning. Our second set of lectures for Chapter 7 is 7.2 that looks at market failure. This one should be a little bit shorter than section 7.1 and hopefully a little bit more smoother. I think I'm getting the hang of this. All right, so for a market system to be successful, there are 4 conditions that must be met. We must have adequate competition. As we've discussed all semester, when you have competition, you will have low prices and high quality. We want well-informed buyers and sellers. You want to know the price, not just as a consumer for what you should pay for a product, but businesses should also know what resources do they need and how much should they cost. We want there to be mobility of resources across industries. An example of this would be if a worker lost a job in one industry, their skill set might be usable in a different industry. And we want prices to reflect costs. So let's look at what happens when we have market failure. So we will have market failure if we have inadequate competition. We need there to be competition because we need businesses to be efficient. If there's no competition, there's no incentive to be efficient. Efficiency means using your resources smartly. If you have a lot of competition, you need to keep your prices low in order to compete. So you've got to use your resources efficiently. If you don't, then you have to raise your price to cover up your inefficiency, and then customers will choose to go to a different business. In terms of the economic and political power, this kind of relates to your government from last semester, that when businesses get very large, they do start to, well, not just economic power, but also power in government. You might remember looking at some of the special interest groups, and that could be a problem without competition. In terms of inadequate competition, we're also talking about the consumer and the producer, not just the producer. We want there to be competition for products. We want businesses to feel like they need to meet our demand. Unfortunately, though, if we look at United States industries over time, we're actually seeing less and less competition because we're seeing more mergers and acquisitions. Mergers is something that we will look at in our next chapter. Another cause for market failure would be inadequate information. Businesses and consumers need to know what the market conditions are. They need to be able to make informed decisions on making a product, buying a product, what should it cost, what should their expectations be. So we can see market failure when this condition does not exist. Our third reason for market failure would be resource immobility. And that goes back to what we discussed earlier with what conditions you need for a market to be successful. We need resources to be able to move within our economy. As previously stated, that could be labor and workers, that their skill set moves across industries. It might be a factory space that if a particular factory goes out of business, that same factory can be repurposed to make something else. So those would be the best examples for resource immobility. Our last reason for market failure is when prices do not reflect costs, and that brings us to the discussion of externalities. Externalities, the basic definition is an unintended side effect to an uninvolved third party, and they can be both good and bad. Basically, somebody who is on the side has been affected. Your book gives you the example of an airport. An airport could be both positive or negative. It would be considered a positive externality. Maybe if you if you had a business in a community where they decided to open up an airport, if you maybe ran a restaurant, it might increase the customer traffic coming in to your restaurant. In that case, that would be a positive externality. But for example, maybe you had a house. And when they built this airport, the noise, the pollution, and the traffic that it brought in could take the value of your house down. So you could look at both positives and negative externalities when it comes to an airport. Another example of a negative externality would be the sriracha plant that you read about, with the pepper oils entering the air and causing eye irritation, nausea. That would definitely be a negative externality. they are considered a market failure because that externality is not included in the price of the product. So when Sriracha placed its prices on its hot sauce, it really didn't include the fact that they were inconveniencing and harming the health of a community. The last topic in this chapter, this section is on public goods. Public goods are also considered one form of a market failure because these are goods the government is forced to provide as opposed to having the private industry provide these goods. The government provides these goods so that in an area where private business may not necessarily step up, they feel like they're forced to step up and provide them. So an example of this would be national defense. It might be your police, it might be your fire, but basically one person using it doesn't take away from another person's ability to enjoy the service or benefit from the service. The reason that our market system does not produce public goods, it generally doesn't make a lot of money. So there's no incentive for private business to provide for the public good. Another great example of a public good would be a library. Libraries, everybody can use them, and one person using it doesn't mean that another person can't use it or derive some satisfaction from going to the library. We've discussed libraries before. It's definitely not an area that a private business would go. There's no money to be made. So public goods definitely exist where there's no money to be made. Overall, the free market system is very good about taking care of individual wants, where an individual person can buy a particular product. But when it comes to taking care of the collective good, where there's not necessarily a lot of money to be made, that's where the free market system does not do a very good job. So that particular section is pretty short. So I will get back to you with section 3 notes tomorrow.